Project managers, have you ever felt like you should get that promotion or a better job? Start a business. Write that book. Have you ever felt you were made for more but didn't know where to start?
Welcome to the PM for the Masses podcast with your host, Cesar Traci.
Learn from the experts. Think outside the box. Have a voice, network, and be extraordinary.
PM for the Masses podcast.
Well, hello everybody once again and welcome. I'm Cesar Traci, your host, with Tracy Duez, your co-host. And this show is your regular reminder that your career matters more than your job and that your life is a project and you are the manager. Whether you work for a company or for yourself, your job stability is really just your ability to land your next gig. So, join me in practicing intentional, planned, and value-adding relevance starting right now. Tracy, how are you?
I am terrific. How are you, Cesar?
I'm great. It's Thursday for us. It's Friday for our guest, and I'll introduce him in a second. But we have here on Iain Fraser with us today. Tracy, how did you know of Iain?
Well, yeah, I knew of Iain because he presents at PMI Seminars World like I do, and I think I've heard people actually say nice things about him, which can be rare at PM. No, I'm just teasing. It's a good thing. So yeah. So I thought, hey, let's invite him to be on the show.
All right. So we're going to talk about the project management profession today. Maybe a little bit of agile, PMOs, certifications. Let's see where we go with this conversation. I think it's going to be a catch-all for project managers and topics of interest for everybody listening right now. And let me introduce our guest. Iain is a globally recognized expert in modern portfolio program and project management practices. In 2006, he was the chairman of the global board of directors of the PMI and vice chair in 2005, where he oversaw a period of considerable growth and global expansion. Today, he's an author, speaker, trainer, professional director, and podcast guest here today. His specialties include business governance, portfolio program and project management consultancy, project rescue, EPMO, PMOs, value management, change management, and benefits management. And Iain Fraser is on the line with us today from his home in Wellington, New Zealand. How are you, Iain?
Look, I am very awesome, actually. I have to say, with Tracy's comment about being very positive, it is my Friday morning, so it's the end of the week. So one gets up to a peak on Wednesday and maintains that. So I carry that through to Friday. So look, thank you so much, both of you, for the very kind invitation. It's just energized me to have a conversation with you both this morning, and I hope our listeners enjoy it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for taking the time for being here today. And we have you in New Zealand, Tracy in the US, and I'm in Canada. So it's a truly global podcast today.
Fantastic.
It's awesome.
So, Iain, tell us a little bit about how you, got to be where you are today. Talking and doing training and speaking and authoring books. We'll get to the book in a minute, but tell us a little bit about your journey in your career as a project manager.
Certainly, look, great, and I'll keep this short, obviously, but I don't want to give my age away in too much detail, But look, I probably look back over my career, and like many people within the project management profession, one doesn't necessarily set out to become a project manager or a program manager or whatever. The notion of the accidental profession very much applies to myself, where initially I wanted to become an engineer when I left school and went to university. I was heart sent on becoming an engineer of some sort. Mechanical was my preference. Didn't really warm to that, so stumbled around for a few years as one does, went back to uni a few years later and did what I needed to do and got what I needed to get. And then I really got employed by a company called Brown & Root, which at that time were very, very active in the North Sea oil and gas sector. And I got employed for them and by them. And no sooner than I got employed, I was put in a management development program, which basically meant it was a structured program of learning through each business unit. We spent a bit of time, got to know the inside of how each business unit worked, and therefore then got to know how the organization worked as a whole. At the end of that, then I was able to choose which department I could go and work with, and I picked what was then called the bid, a very clumsy name actually, but the bid and planning office or something very similar, because it was cool and kind of front end stuff. And they did these massive bids for massive amounts of money for building structures that were going to be placed in the North Sea. And there was this planning function, which was really pretty cool, I thought at the time. Well, it planned out all the work and all that went into bids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that really captivated me. And I actually credit almost that was the beginning of what we now would call a PMO, built it up from there. Since then, I have had the very good fortune to travel around the world, work across many, many sectors, and that sort of accumulated it in starting a business, a consultancy business, which was based around portfolio, program, and project management, and how that could offer value into business. Took that company global, and I just sold that just recently. So now I've kind of stepped into the semi-retired bracket. And that's given me some time to write a little bit more, which is something I always enjoy doing and like doing. But meanwhile, in parallel with all of that, I have a PMI sort of career that, as you said in your introduction, Cesar, thank you, that culminated in me being chair of the board of PMI, global PMI, in 2006, when the board had decided just prior to that to take the organization global. As you both probably know, and as many of the listeners would attest to, PMI, as other project management oriented organizations in different parts of the world, have enjoyed immense success. And it feels very satisfying to be able to reflect back a little bit and say, gosh, I was part of a group of people who, actually got very excited about, the potential of the Project Management Institute from a global perspective, and made some decisions accordingly. So, kind of a couple of parallel careers there, if I could offer that.
Yeah, and it sounds like from birth you just knew that this was your call. No, I'm just teasing, right? It's something that, as you said, a lot of people seem to fall into this profession. So. So what's your take on, because you have had this experience, what's your take on project management as a profession today? Yeah,
look, a good question, Tracy. And I think when you look at the project management profession, I think obviously one has to include program and portfolio and PMOs and EPMOs and everything that kind of bundles together into the term project management. I think, to answer your question, I think the profession is in a phase of continued excitement, of growth, but also of challenge. And I think there's, it's fine to grow and it's fine to kind of, observe the demand, the increasing demand for services that people in the profession offer. But I think there's some challenges and therefore then perhaps risks associated with fractures within, and I'll use PMI as my sort of case study, if you like. There is a risk of fractures in so much that I see parts of the profession looking somewhat inward and getting very bound up in methodologies and type X versus type Y, or method A versus method B. And whilst I understand some of that, I think there's a deeper challenge, and that challenge is associated with how can the profession and those of us within the profession offer real value to the organization that we might work for, or if we're in a consulting environment, client-based organizations, in terms of helping them be successful in business. Now, part of that could be successful delivery of project output or program output, which leads to outcomes, which subsequently leads to value, but it can also help shape the strategic direction of organizations in some regard as well. So, I think we have to make sure that we don't lose focus, Tracy, on this notion of value, and make sure that we, engage in conversations and dialogue with leaders within the respective organizations that's focused around value and how the profession can contribute towards value, rather than getting trapped in conversations at a lower level. I mean that respectfully, based around, method A versus method B and so on, as I said earlier.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. So When I think of, I work for a company that is, it's a global company, and we're distributed, and a lot of young people and not so young people, and we don't really have an established PMO, for example, right? And I remember when I joined the company, I was very impressed at how they managed to get things done without all this stuff, and reminded me of something I read once, that according to the laws of physics and aerodynamics, beetles should not be able to fly, but because they don't know the laws of physics, they fly anyway, right? So, I know you have experience, establishing PMOs. Do you see that, as I think of some of the big name companies right now in the area of web development, web apps like Twitter and Facebook, and how they all got started. I'll risk a guess that they did not have, maybe they don't even have still a PMO. What are your thoughts about bringing more process to these new companies that are doing well? I mean, they're worth billions of dollars, but yet they don't seem to be too worried about process.
Look, there was a stage in my early career where I thought process, as I would call it, wasn't the solution, and wrapped up with an iron-fisted methodology and supporting templates and stuff like that. And actually, in part of my earlier career, I actually designed and wrote many of those things that would you believe some of my clients are still actually using, which is kind of scary actually. But look, there is a place for process. There is a place for structure and consistency of application, or whether it's project or program management or even portfolio management. I think a PMO does lend itself to be the natural custodian, if I could use that term, for such a system or mechanism, if you prefer. But what I see, again, it links back to the first question too that Tracy asked about where is the PM profession going, and some of those risks or fractures I mentioned. I think PMOs come under a bit of a bad rap every now and again. Some of it's justified, some of it is not. And to me, again, it goes back to focusing on the right things at the right time. And to your question, Cesar, I think there's certainly a tremendous shift globally in terms of what I refer to as the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and somewhat ambiguous. Altogether, that's a term, the VUCA, that somebody, I'm not quite sure who it was, came up with. And I really, really like that, because it captures nicely, I think, the sort of world that we're all moving into, and that young professionals within the P3M profession, that's portfolio program and project management profession, are beginning to see. It's all exciting, it's good, but it also is telling us that we need to be a lot more adaptive and a lot more nimble in our approaches. And therein lies the dilemma between, excuse me, the dilemma in between process to make sure of standardization and compliance-oriented stuff that an organization may want, versus the need to adapt really quickly to changing circumstances, whether it's technology-induced, geopolitical-induced, competitive induced, or whatever. I think all of us now as leaders need to understand that that short-term nimbleness leads to kind of longer-term resilience. Mm. So, just to add to that, if I may, and back to your specific question, I think PMOs need to understand that big time, in my view. And I think one of the issues that PMOs have been tarnished with, and I think rightly, is the level of maturity and therefore the capability within the team, irrespective of what size it might be. I think there's been acquisitions that I've come across of people within PMOs, and the PMO therefore then function as a kind of administrative body, squirting out reports and checking up on people who are not using the right templates, and simply because the level of human capability and maturity in there, and when I say maturity, I mean maturity from a professional point of view, not from an age point of view, is not at the right place to offer, I think, real value to the organization. So I think there's, again, a crossroads type of environment, to use that metaphor, that PMOs need to be looking at. And I know that PMI and their absolutely sensationally good PMO symposium that they hold annually in different parts of the world, different parts of the USA in particular, really creates a platform where PMO leaders and business leaders can come together and really interrogate this changing world and what it might mean for their respective organizations.
Yeah, Iain, you brought up something early on there too about, you kept saying the word value over and over again. And sure. I truly believe that if project management offices, because sometimes they get a little bit of a bad rap with all the processes and procedures that you alluded to, I think if they just called themselves a VMO, which is truly what they're just supposed to be doing, but being a value management office, I think they get a different point of view and would really be focused on what the business wants, right? What the corporations want. Because they don't want programs. They don't even want projects or portfolios, but they do want the results of being able to manage the value that's created by those.
I think, Tracy, that's a great point, actually, and I think there is a bit of a stigma associated with some of the language, I have the good fortune of traveling around the world and meeting business leaders in different sectors and in different countries, and you're right. I think often I hear from some of those executives that I meet that they've been burnt in some way. That, look, we've had a PMO and failed, therefore we're not going there again, for example, or we've tried portfolio management, it didn't work, therefore then we're not going to do it again. And they just miss the point. And I think not because they're dumb people, far from it. They were smart people, intelligent people. But I think the whole selling proposition that the P3M profession and those work within it, the language that they've used to try and sell the need for a PMO or sell the need for program management or portfolio management has been wrong. It's been disconnected. And therefore, then the executives they're not hearing those key words that they want to hear. And therefore, then I think that they tend to get somewhat negative, again, based on some experience they may have had in the past. That's not a good situation. And you're dead right that the conversation needs to shift round to value. And look, I'm originally from the Highlands of Scotland, so value is not just monetary value. So I just want that on record, guys. Scotsmen saying it's not just about money, Ooh.
Yeah.
To me, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's interesting because that's what I teach all about value and the science of value and axiology and all that kind of stuff. Nobody really cares to learn about that. What they care about is what does that mean? And you're exactly right in that money is the middle of the hierarchy. It's not even at the top. What's at the top is the human experience. And I think that's a lot of what's missing with the PM, whatever the PM stands for, whether it's portfolio, program, sure. Even if you spell it with an E on the end, or project. Right. I think that's really what it's about is that human experience. Because no matter if you're developing an application or a product or whatever, you're not just developing that. You're developing. Somebody has to buy it, and they're going to buy it not because that you followed a process. They're going to buy it because of the value that you added.
You're absolutely right, Tracy, and I think all of us need to pick that up, actually, that value word, and help the profession, help business leaders, help business executives kind of understand and define what value means, because I think it's a word that we're all very comfortable using in our daily language. It's a word that we instinctively would nod our heads if somebody said, do you know what value is? We'd instinctively nod our heads. Are you adding value today? We'd say, of course I am. However, when you unpick that a little bit further, I think to me, each and every organization, whether it's an executive leadership team roundtable or even the board of directors or the combination of both those things, they need to be having a conversation about what value actually means for their organization. Define that really well. I think there's a correlation with values. What are our values, which leads into culture? But let me stay with the value aspect. I think to me there are 4 themes of value. And for what it's worth, I'll share those with you. So there's value to customers, value to staff and brand, monetary value, of course, to your good point about the conduit in the middle, and some form of strategic value. So those are my 4 quadrants, if you like, of value. And I think board of directors discussion and setting strategy, executive leaders in terms of interpreting that strategy need to be revolving their decision making around one or more of those value quadrants, and therefore then using the output of those value discussions into the population of portfolios. Now, I should qualify that by saying in my book, in my business book, and I know you want to talk about that coming up, so I'll not labour the point now, I offer the notion that portfolio management in a true sense is the blending of OPEX and CAPEX, i.e. operational expenditure and capital expenditure. And when I say the blending of it, I actually bring that up and I say, portfolio management, this is how we run our business, or this is how we run our organization, actually, maybe a better word. Now, when you bring it up to that level, I think, and then drop in the notion of value, Tracy, to your very good point, all of a sudden, you've got executives listening to you, and the conversation starts to shift. Now, I think if EPMOs, for example, could bring a conversation up to, the balancing of OPEX and CAPEX, doing more of the right things, contributing to one or more of those value quadrants, then look, there's no question that that's going to be received well at the exec table, and it's also going to be received well at the board of directors level as well.
Yeah, so Iain, one of the things that I recognized, working with PMI and the PMI seminars world like you do, is that one of the first places I ever heard value even mentioned was in the Agile methodologies manifesto. And so what is it about Agile, or what do you think about the Agile development process?
Yeah, great question. Look, I guess lots of your listeners who know me would be saying, yeah, Iain's got some fairly interesting views, and I'll share some of them with you. Now is probably inappropriate to share some others with you. Look, I think the Agile Manifesto actually is a really good piece of thinking and a good piece of work, and particularly suitable for as a philosophy for today's fast-changing environment, the VUCA world that I referenced a little bit earlier. I think, however, where it falls down, it's kind of connected back to some of those earlier questions we were discussing. It kind of falls into a little bit of a trap in so much that people bring it down to a very common level, a very low level, and talk about, flavor X of Agile and flavor Y, and a lot of kind of what I would term geeky sort of approaches, which I can tell you no executive on the planet is interested at all in. They don't care. And I think within the profession, we get caught navel gazing. I guess everybody's familiar with that term, where we're kind of gazing at our navels. We're talking a good talk because it's cool. We think it's cool. But again, Tracy, back to your question about value, I think we need to stop and ask ourselves, hey, wait, have we lost sight of the manifesto direction and this notion of value? And interesting, in the Agile Manifesto, value is not even defined very well, in my view. So in my book, I've kind of taken up 4 quadrant element that I mentioned. I think it's critical to each every organization understand that. How then value is broken down, planned for, delivered, and captured, I think is up to each organization to adapt and adopt whatever system or method or approach they want. To me, I think it's more about adaptability and nimbleness rather than X product or Y product. So I guess the philosophy of lean is good because it's all about speeding up and reducing waste. Well, look, as a business executive, as a former CEO, I'll take that any day, because that I know is going to contribute to my bottom line and to make my organization more efficient, more competitive. It's going to, people within the brand who are working for me are going to feel good about it. The brand is going to shine. But if I was, by contrast, if I was to say, well, we're agilists, whatever that might mean, and it can mean different things to different people, and therefore we have, great stand-up meetings, post-it notes, and funny terms that we call meetings. I mean, who cares? It's not important. What is important is the fundamental philosophy of Festo and this notion of value. I think those are the critical things.
Great. So, Iain, what do you think of certifications? I mean, you're neck deep into the PMI, so I think I know the answer. But what do you think of certifications? Again, as you mentioned, the world is changing, and it's hard enough sometimes to convince organizations that they need process if they manage to grow and start without it, let alone ask of their employees or managers to actually pursue certification. So what is your take on that?
I think, a short answer and a long answer, which do you prefer? But I think the whole certification thing is really interesting. And when we say certifications, I guess we need to look at qualifications and even include tertiary-based learning opportunities. So to me, I think there's an awful lot of money wasted on certifications at a very low level, where I see people rushing around and getting certifications on particular methodologies so they can stamp their CV, and perhaps in a contracting environment that seems to be important. And I get that. I get part of that. What I don't get, though, is this endless focus on the lower end of stuff, where really I think because of the changing world that's coming to, we need to be shifting our learning into areas that allow us to think more about value, to communicate value, to assess value, and deliver value in our respective organizations. All of that within the balancing of risk and opportunity, and knowing that what we might set out to do on a Monday could very well change by a Friday because of some aspect in some different part of the world that we have little or no control over. So, I mean, that's the reality that we're moving into. Whether it's Monday, Friday might be a bit of a stretch, but hey, you get my point, I hope. So I think certifications have their place, but I'm aware of some certifications where people are allowed to sit an exam with an open book and plug in answers, and they get a bit of a paper that looks terrific and says certain wonderful things in it. But really, you ask yourself, well, what is that actually contributing to the well-being of an organization? And again, going back to your point, Tracy, about is it actually allowing the contribution and demonstration of value capture? So value creation is one thing, but if you can't capture value, then value creation means that we end up, having significant wastage within an organization. So I think there's probably going to be a bit of an ongoing debate about qualifications versus certifications versus tertiary. I think maybe that's a conversation for another day, perhaps. To me, fundamentally, it's about expertise and experience, first and foremost. And I think those two things, if he, she, and them can, as individuals and groups, can offer expertise and experience, then I'm totally convinced that can be done without certification and or qualifications. So perhaps that's where we should leave that.
All right. Yeah, well, you don't want to get you in any kind of trouble. Especially more since trouble. We both speak at PMI. Yeah, we don't want to get in any more trouble. Good point. Yes. So Iain, we've talked a lot about here today about, portfolios, programs, projects, right? Value, PMOs, EPMOs, those kind of things. So what do organizational leaders need to be considering?
Great question. Thank you. Absolutely fantastic, actually. And I think, again, we touched on a little bit of this, but let me just bring all of that back into, a bit of a perspective on that question, Tracy. Excuse me. I think, first of all, leaders at all levels need to be mindful and need to be giving some thought and conversation in the collective group to the VUCA world, as I refer to it, and how that might impact their organizational well-being. And this applies equally to for-profit as well as non-profit organizations. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing then is to build conversations more around value and the management of value. So value creation, value delivery, value capture, if you prefer. I think those conversations aren't held enough in organizations. Certainly in my travels and in my conversations, I think there needs to be a great deal more of that so we get focused on the right things. That said, however, I think it's a question of looking at strategic direction through a number of relatively short-term strategic goals. And when I say relatively short-term, I think we're talking about 2 years and 5 years now, as opposed to maybe 5 and 10 years that we might have thought about a decade ago. I think those big windows of strategy have closed simply because the VUCA world is meaning we need to adjust and adapt far quicker than we've done in the past. So I think we need to rethink our approaches to strategy. I think when we see and hear statistics from well-recognized and respected organizations such as the Economist Intelligence Unit, who tell us that, based on some survey stuff that they've done, that 74% of all strategies fail. And then the good people at PMI tell us that the global failure rate for programs and projects is stagnant around 30%. That tells us that the approaches that we're taking and the approaches we've done through the 20th century are possibly no longer applicable for the 21st century. So we need to kind of rethink how we do strategy, and we certainly need to rethink how we implement that strategy so that we reduce those somewhat horrendous figures of failure and improve, again, Tracy, to your question earlier, we improve the value contribution from a professional point of view, from the P3M profession. We add true value to our organization through PMOs, through our delivery of output and outcomes, because we have a focus on value and whatever definition that is. So, I think those are the things that leaders need to be thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thank you. Now, Iain, before we go, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about your book. It's called The Business of Portfolio Management, Boosting Organizational Value. So who is this book for, and where should we go to get it?
Right. Well, okay, 3 questions there then. Look, first of all, and let me try and answer those, hopefully in the order. But
I could add more questions too if you want. No.
Well, please do. Look, the book. Thank you, and the book deals with today's organizational challenges and disruptors. So some of the very things we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes or so. The book is designed to feed some perspective around that. It's about improving business value, as the subtitle suggests. It's about lifting organizational performance by speeding up and reducing waste. So a bit of a philosophy of lean in there. So that's what the book is about. And it's crafted in a manner that combines a value-driven approach to portfolio management, but portfolio management in a very higher sense than some of the common definitions that exist today. So again, my definition is this is how we do business. So I've lifted and elevated portfolio management up, but tacked on this value management framework at the front end to allow a better bridge to be built between strategic dialogue and strategic plans or objectives, or goals, I beg your pardon, into business objectives that are manifested through portfolio content, both OPEX and CAPEX together. And that, to me, I think will foster better implementation or end-to-end implementation of strategic intentions. Right? So that's what the book is about. Who's it intended for? It's intended for, I was going to say this, everybody. but more specifically, it's intended for professional directors, it's intended for executive leaders, it's intended for middle management leaders. I'm so sorry, excuse me. It's intended for those people within the P3M profession who are looking to become more proficient at portfolio management at a higher level. Those people who are perhaps looking to take their portfolio management office up to an enterprise space and work and deliver value across the organization. That's who the book's intended for. It was published by PMI, the Project Management Institute, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And it is selling around the world. The book was published in July of 2017 and is available directly from PMI, of course, through their marketplace thing, but also available through the usual channels such as Amazon, Fishpond, Mighty Ape, iBooks, Google Books or Google Play, whatever it is. And of course, bookstores, real proper bookstores. Some of us still like, I think, going into a bookshop and smelling the books and touching them and reading the inside back cover, etc. So my book is there, and it's an executive book, really, so it's hardcover, and apparently selling very well, to the point where I believe now I can call myself a best-selling author. So
that's great.
So there you go. Hopefully that answers your 3 questions.
That's great. And I will have a link to the book and where people can buy it on the show notes for today's episode. And this is episode 114, so people can go to pmforthemasses.com/114. Again, pmforthemasses.com/114. Now, Iain, thank you so much for your time. If people want to learn more about you and what you do, and maybe get you to come and speak at their PMI conference, PM conference, where should they go?
Well, I'm just getting a website set up actually right now, so that's hopefully going to be live in a couple of weeks. Meanwhile, I think find me on LinkedIn. I think I've got quite an active profile on LinkedIn. It's the only social media channel I use. Or email me, ian.fraser@jacobite.co.nz. And perhaps, Cesar, there's some spelling aspects associated with the first name. Maybe either you, Cesar, or you, Tracy, could help your listeners and readers perhaps get that email address. So LinkedIn possibly might be the first channel. Connect with me there, and certainly more than welcome to. I'm very interested in having discussions with people around, having a chat with executive leaders and stuff. That's what I do now in different parts of the world. So thank you very much.
Yeah, fantastic. So thank you for your time again. Again, you can find links to Iain's book, The Business of Portfolio Management, Boosting Organizational Value. Also a link to his LinkedIn page, and one for the website too, when the website is up at pmforthemasses.com/114. Iain, Tracy, thank you so much for your time today.
And thank you
Iain,
both.
thank you. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Tracy. I really appreciate that. And thank you, Cesar, also. Yeah, really nice conversation, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the PM for the Masses podcast.
Tune in next week for more great ideas on how to manage your projects better and truly stand out in your industry.
pmforthemasses.com